Welcome to another episode of Romance Unleashed. Today we have Nikki Sloane, not in my house, but in her house, in an undisclosed location somewhere in the United States. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Nikki, tell us everything about you, starting with how'd you start writing?
So I got my start writing. I actually wrote screenplays for a long time, and I had some success, but nothing that went into production. So after doing that and like nothing ever making it onto the screen, I was like so tired of just writing stuff and nobody getting to see it. So then I was like, well, I'll just try writing books. And even if only 100 people read that book, that's like 90 more people than read screenplays. So I made the switch to writing books, and I like to write the very, very steamy books. So yeah.
Did any of your book ideas come from any of your screenplays?
Yes, actually, my book, The Rivalry, was one of the screenplays that I had optioned for a little while. So it's a sports romance, and writing that was a really fun experience because I could take whole sections from the screenplay, like dialogue and everything, and just drop it right into the manuscript and then just flesh things out. So yeah.
Nice. Why romance? Like, why have you always read romance, or where did you get your start?
So I did not read romance growing up because I wasn't really allowed. Mm-hmm. My parents were very supportive of me being a reader, but just not that type of book. So the rule in my family was they'll buy any book that you want in the bookstore, but I had to give it to my father for approval. So if it had like a half undressed person on the cover, it was an automatic no. So the only I don't know if I would call it a romance book, but like romance adjacent books that I was allowed to read when I was younger, I had to sneak them in because they'd have to have discrete covers. So V.C. Andrews, Flower in the Attic, that would make it past my dad's because he didn't know what was really inside that book. So after college, I started to read some romantic suspense books that had some spice in them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. There are more books out there like this. So then, I got into reading romance, and that's all I want to write. That's all I want to read.
I love that. What was the first book that you started working on when you decided to start writing romance? So
the first book I wrote actually was under a different pen name. It's a romantic suspense book. And so, and I published that in 2014. So it didn't have a ton of spice in it. My editor at the time was like, oh, no, there's too much heat in this. So I had to dial back my sex scenes. So that's why I ended up writing other books under a different pen name that I could put all of the steamy stuff that wouldn't sell in romantic suspense.
Was that how you ended up with Nikki Sloane?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so is there another pen name we can look into?
So yes. So Karen Lawrence, and it's Karyn. Lawrence is the original, the romantic suspense series that I started with.
Do a lot of your readers know this?
I think so. I'm not sure. So it's certainly not a secret. I just don't. It's been a long time. I mean, those books it's been 11 years since those books came out. So, and then, like I said, they don't have the same heat that Nikki Sloane book has. Okay.
Were you already married when you started writing romance?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was that brought into your relationship?
I mean, it's been great. He reads all of my stuff. And he's, he was definitely not a romance reader to begin with, but now he's really good. We brainstorm a lot of stuff together. So yeah, it's definitely brought us closer together.
I love that.
Yeah.
We love Nick in this house. At first, when you introduced the idea of writing romance, was there any discussion of how do we do this, or because you also have kids, right? So how does that impact their school, especially now they're going into older grades and things like that?
So actually, I have two stories to tell about that. So the first one is that when I started writing the Nikki Sloane books, obviously they're very hot, and my husband's family's a little bit more conservative. So I was like, we're just not going to tell anybody. They knew I had written the Karen Lawrence books, but so we told everybody I've started a different pen name. But we're just not going to tell it to you.
Right.
So my mother-in-law, who I love very much and is amazing, couldn't stand it. She absolutely had to know. So she did some internet sleuthing unbeknownst to me.
I love
So
this.
the first book that I wrote was part of the Blindfold Club series. And so we're sitting around at the pool one day, just talking or whatever. And I don't know how we got on the discussion about blindfolds, but she turns to me and says, "Oh, well, we know how much you love blindfolds, Nikki." And I was like, oh my God. You didn't like read any of the blurbs or anything for the book, right? And she was like, "Oh, no. I just read the book." And I was like, what? So then she obviously knew, and then it was out, and all of my family now knows the name. Luckily, nobody really reads it except for my stepmother-in-law reads my books, which is totally fine. And then the other story is, so obviously my kids know, they see the books all the time.
Right.
And my kids they're older now, but when my oldest was in 3rd grade, I want to say, they asked at school, they were like, "Does anybody's parent have an interesting job?" And he was like, oh, my mom's an author. And they're like, "Oh, that's amazing. What does she write?" And he goes, "Oh, erotic romance," like to the 3rd grade class. And so, all those kids had to be like, "What does erotic mean?"
Right.
It's like, honey, just say romance.
Yeah.
That's all. You don't need to be that specific.
Yeah. And like, did the teacher say anything?
So I don't think it was the same teacher, but definitely got around the school. And I did have several teachers email me and be like, "Let's be best friends."
Oh, I love that. I was going to say, like, since then, do you have teachers that have recognized you or like know that you're Nikki Sloane?
Yeah, because we just moved, and right before we moved, one of the teachers brought a book to me and asked me to sign. So yeah.
I love that. It's so interesting because I feel like growing up, you feel like your teachers are these like super adult humans that are like so responsible, and now like your friends are teachers and you're like,
you don't see them as like humans, like
Right.
they're other, like, yeah.
I think that happens a lot too with like parents. Like you see parents in this like superhuman, and then like later you realize like, oh no, they're just human. Yeah, I love that. How about your parents? How do they feel about you writing?
So I mean, they've always been really supportive, and they're so happy for me. But and my dad even he was a nurse for a while, so he would take copies of the Karen Lawrence books. He would take those copies and like give them to like all of his coworkers and stuff like that.
He could take the doctor.
But he's not a nurse anymore. He's retired. But yeah, I think he's that serious. Like it's a little more taboo. It's a little racier.
Right.
He's like, "I'm proud of you. I don't need to know anything else about the books."
Great job, honey. But
my sister will not read any of my books. She says she's tried, and she says she hears me, and that's too much for her. And I was like, you could try audiobooks, because then you wouldn't hear me.
Right.
But she's like, no, we're good.
Okay, so for people who are just starting your Nashville series, can you tell us a little bit about what they can find in each book?
Sure. So the doctor is, it's the ex-boyfriend's dad. So she's 20 and she's 19 in the beginning of the book, and he's 40. So it's a pretty big age gap. That book is probably 90% sex, 10% plot, but like, I don't think you'll be mad about it.
No, you won't. And sorry, can I add that like, I think I've said this on like a lot of podcasts. So like maybe God will eventually bless me with like a hot ex-boyfriend who also has a dad that's even hotter. Yeah. And then like I can just get with daddy.
Yeah. And you can have role play too with your doctor.
Please, what am I doing wrong? If you hate me, just say that. Okay. Anyway, continue.
So the pool boy is older woman, younger man. So and it's her best friend's son. So it's pretty taboo, and it's a rock star romance too. So and then the third book is The Architect, which is, I think it's my hottest book, just because it's so BDSM heavy. There's stuff in there that I haven't seen in any other books before, and so like it's like people talk about it's educational, right? Because there's just so much stuff in it. Yeah. So but it's a why choose. And then book 4 is The Frat Boy, which is the one most people say is my hottest book, because it is about it's enemies to lovers. They get each other kicked out of their frat and sorority, so they don't have any housing. They end up living together in a house that is like a cam house. So they end up doing porn together, and it is really hot. So you got all the porn tropes in that one.
Forced proximity for me, truly.
Yeah. that one was really fun to write.
Yeah.
That was probably next to The Rivalry. That was probably my second most fun to write. And then book 5 is The Good Girl, which is Preston's book from the doctor. That's the ex-boyfriend who was a bad boy in the first book of the series, and he gets sort of his redemption in the 5th book. And it's his best friend's younger sister. And
eat it up.
And so she's a good girl. She wants to be bad, so she needs some sexy lessons from the bad boy.
And book 6.
So book 6 is going to be The Broker. Haven't finished outlining it yet, but it's going to be age gap. He's a lot older. She is cleaning his house for him. He's just moved into the national neighborhood, and she's cleaning his house. And he's a swinger, so he likes to play with people, and she walks in on him when he's with a married woman. But you know, her husband's all for it. He likes to be cuckolded, and yeah, so that's where we're at so far.
Lovely. Yeah. Oh, so like I have my cleaning ladies who are Sweet Cleaners LLC. If you're in South Florida, give them a holler. They're the best. But my poor cleaning ladies. Sometimes I wonder, like, they're like, what the fuck did we just walk into? Because obviously, like with the steam box, I have like all the vibrators, right? And I try to be very mindful about when they're coming. And like, if I use the toy, I like to clean it and like put it away. But sometimes if I'm traveling, I'm just like on the go and I'm just leaving things all over the place. And they are like, they'll even organize them. Like, oh, you left them on the nightstand. Like we're
by
just
size,
gonna, they just kind of like, they're like, here you go. And I'm like, Melissa.
I bet they've seen it all.
Yeah. Like they have no. And then like also, and like the other day, there was a condom lost inside of me. Okay.
It happens.
And I was sure where it was lost, but everyone was like, check your sheets. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, like, I know where it is. Okay. And we're going to go to the ER later. But everyone was like, check your sheets. And my clean ladies were coming. And I was like, how do I ask them, have you found the condom in my sheets? Anyway, the condom was found. It was still inside of me. It was not in the sheets. And it came out 2 weeks later. Why did I not die? I don't know.
So did you end up going to the ER or no?
Yeah, and the ER couldn't fucking find it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, I went to urgent care first. And mind you, everyone on Threads has been waiting on this story. So here it is, Threads. I went to urgent care first. And they have you fill out like a form online. And I was like, you know, I put the reason why I was there. And I was like, great, I don't have to like speak this out loud in the lobby.
You have to say it every time, right?
And they were like, so why are you here? And I was like, there's a condom
just read the form.
beside me. Like, why are we doing this? Anyway, I'm pretty sure that the urgent care doctor has not seen a vagina ever or in many years. You would think. He couldn't find my cervix.
Oh my God.
So I was like, and like, you know, if you've had like a PAP, you know, they put like the thing inside you and then you hear the clicking.
Yeah.
Right. And like, it's like inside, click, 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 you're good. This guy was like inside, click, pull, click. And I was like, you know what? We're done here. Thank you. So then I ended up in the ER and the ER was like, I mean, we can see your cervix, but like, we don't see a condom. So are you sure it was? And I'm like, I know that it is in here.
Yeah, it didn't just vanish.
No, it did not vanish. I know. And I think that, you know, that comes to the whole other conversation of like, a lot of what I heard from people was like, well, are you sure he even put on a condom? And I was like, yes, I watched it with my two. And they're like, you're sure he didn't like pull it off? And I'm like, I am like, I don't know what kind of sex y'all are having, but I can tell you that I know what is happening with what's going in and out of my vagina. So anyway, it came out 2 weeks later. And I was about to go to the gyno because that was the next step. They're like, you're just going to have to go to the gyno. They have the right tools.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, first, why is it so hard to get into the gyno? Two, like, I could have died. Yeah. None of y'all thought, like, you should have done an ultrasound. Like, and I think that goes back to, like, women and talking to doctors and, like, just, like, the stigma behind, again, sex, right? Because even when I told the urgent care doctor, like, this is what was going on, he was like, and I'm like, why? Like, Have you not had a lost condom? Like, no, you should probably experience it, you know? So anyway, a good time was had. Anyway,
No condoms?
I not for that length of time. I mean,
no, I hope
maybe just like
I hope not for. And I mean, that has happened to me in college before, but it was like the next day it was out kind of thing.
Oh no, so I've only had it where it's like it's been like 2 minutes.
Second,
where it's like, where is it? Oh, here it is.
Yeah. No. Anyway, you're welcome, Threads. This is the hot tea on the urgent care ER story. Everyone was like, what was lost inside you? And I was like, another day. Have you received any like backlash or just like commentary because your books are more taboo or more spicier, and how do you navigate that?
So the only backlash I've ever received is just I wrote a book called Sorted that's it's got a scene of dubious consent that's integral to the book. I cannot remove that scene. And Amazon said, no, absolutely not. So they banned that book. So so you can get it anywhere else. You can get it on all the other retailers. But that was a really trying time when that happened. I had just quit my job to write full time, and then it got banned. And so I was sort of like, what do I do? But it ended up being sort of the silver, like a blessing in disguise, because I was able to more awareness to my brand and stuff like that. And I'm really like glad I wrote that book. It really pushed me to write more taboo stuff. I'd never written anything like that before. I don't know if today I could write that book. I don't know. I was fearless when I was like a baby author. I was fearless, but now I have more of like, oh no, what are readers going to think? What are they going to say on, Instagram about this or whatever? So yeah.
Which is really interesting how I think like that dynamic of like social media is, I don't know if fortunately or unfortunately, because I think for some authors like that check-in needed to come in. But like, how it's affecting your creativity. And me and Candy Steiner talked about this on the last episode, but kind of the same thing, how like in your earlier years, or even when you're just younger in age, you're just so fearless and like just putting it out there. Like, I'm just going to write this and put it out there. And now there's just so much more to consider.
Yes. Because you didn't have anything at stake. Like when you're first starting, you're doing it for the love of it. And so sometimes I wish I could like go back to that. You know what I mean? Like, I feel that a lot. Sometimes I'm like, maybe in like smaller things, but like if I was 20, like, yes, I could get on a bike and ride a bike, but like now don't even bother teaching me because my knees are not going to recover the same way. So we're just like not doing it, But sometimes I miss that like fearlessness that comes with like being younger and like not so many things at stake, because obviously now it affects your livelihood. Right.
For readers who are new to you, what kind of taboo, what's the word? Like, what kind of taboo stories can they find?
So I write a lot of age gap. I love age gap. And it can be, older man, younger woman, or it could be younger man, older woman. So that's probably my biggest taboo. But I also like, I don't know, I like a lot of different
ex-boyfriend's dad.
I like, I like lots of group stuff. I have like one book that has a secret society with like a sex ritual. So
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna have to go back to those. Okay, great. How has writing romance like affected how you embrace your sexuality?
So when I first started writing, I would have said that I was heterosexual. But the first book I wrote as Nikki is FFM. And I was like, wow, it's so hot. It's so hot. Like, I've always been attracted to women. And I don't think, I was raised Catholic, and I don't think my parents were never super religious, and they've always been very, very open and accepting. But I still always felt like that, like I couldn't say I was bisexual. And then I also felt too in college, there's sort of like, if you're, as a woman, I felt like there was a lot of like, are you bisexual, or is this just like a fad? Yeah. Like you're doing it because that's like what the cool kids do.
And bisexual erasure is so real in every day.
Yeah. So, but now I would very strongly say that I'm bisexual.
I love that.
Yeah.
How has that translated into your books?
So my entire Blindfold Club series is all FFM. And it's more, I prefer sex scenes that are multiple people. I definitely like it when the two women interact. But I also have started writing some where it's MMF.
Okay.
So, but yeah, yeah.
Right. For those who are new to like terminology, I guess,
yes.
because there's also FMF,
Yes.
right? And then there's FFM,
Right.
and MFM and MMF. So can you like break that down for us a little bit?
So FFM would be two females that are interacting with each other and a male. And then if you had FMF, that would mean it's a threesome, but the women do not interact with each other. So yeah, and then same with, it just would be the same if it was MMF, that would be the two men interacting with each other.
How have you seen the romance genre or just community as a whole evolve from when you first started writing?
When I first started writing, it was a lot of like alpha male, and that was before Me Too. So I feel like it has changed, or the alpha hole, right? That's really changed. I think that we're seeing a lot of characters that are just more socially conscious, and consent has also gotten really sexy. It used to be like not consent was sexy, and I feel like it's shifted quite a bit.
Yeah.
There's still always going to be a space for people that are into not having consent or maybe not quite safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's changed. I feel like it's changed quite dramatically with that.
For people who are new to your work, what's like a good place to start?
So I guess it depends on what you're looking for. If you don't mind Taboo, or you like Taboo and you want, I guess I would say The Doctor with the age gap. It's the first in my National Neighborhood series. That's a great place to start, because from there I have some books that are darker. I have some books that are lighter. That's sort of right in the middle. Okay. So that's a destination Nikki book. Like, you're going to get my brand in that book.
Have you written any anthologies that people can like check out that can maybe introduce them to your work?
Sure. I was in the mixtape anthology. And so that's totally a standalone story in that one. And then I was also in the 12 Naughty Days, I think is what it was called. And that is that's a very spicy little, it's like On the Sixth Day, I think is what its title is. And it's nice because you get a little holiday if you're into holiday romances.
I love a good holiday romance. What has been your favorite book to write to date?
So that's tough. I can tell you my favorite book that I've written is The Redemption, but writing that was very scary because it is the main character of that book is the villain of the first three books. And so I was nervous to write the book, and my publicist was like, "Oh no, you have to write his book. Everybody wants his book." And I was like, "I don't know if I can redeem him because he's such a bad person." But she was right, and I was able to redeem him. At least I think I was. And so that's my favorite. I feel like his emotional journey is so like outstanding from where he started to where he finishes in that book. But as far as just like the most fun to write, I would probably say The Rivalry was my most fun to write, just because I love that story. It was a romantic comedy as a screenplay, so it was really fun and light, and I'm a big football fan, so yeah.
Do you think you would write more of like the romantic comedy in the future?
Yeah, I think I would. I would love to write a follow-up to The Rivalry, write another, sort of turn it into a series, because The Rivalry is about an Ohio State cheerleader who falls in love with a Michigan football player, which is, obviously a huge rivalry. Right. So I thought, I could do another rivalry and do something. So yeah,
I'm going to have to eat that up tonight. What was your research like for that?
So I went to Purdue and I was in the marching band. So I've been to Michigan games and Ohio State games, and I've interacted with those fans who are both terribly obnoxious. I'm sorry for anybody out there that's Michigan or Ohio State, but your fans are obnoxious. But But so I did a lot of research. I mean, just from experiencing it, and then also like reading all the stuff about the rivalry, watching like documentaries about it because there've been quite a few on ESPN. And so I did. That was one book that I probably researched more than any other book.
Oh, that's sensational. Okay, the rivalry. Someone remind me, please. What was I going to say about rivalry? Band. Let's talk about band.
Yes.
What was that experience like? Have you written any band romances or do you plan to? And like, do y'all get like naughty?
Okay. So I mean, so I was in color guard, so I didn't play an instrument. I was the flag person. I
could so see that.
Yes. I mean, the whole like American Pie that in one time at band camp. Oh yeah, that is absolutely true. Like people they are freaky, right? But I was such a band nerd. I did it 4 years in high school. I did it my 3 years in college. And then I went and coached it for like 5 years. So yeah, I was huge, I actually even wrote a book about techniques of color guard. I wrote that book, but yeah, so I loved it. And, I haven't written, I have like a side character in the rivalry that's a tuba player in Ohio State's band, that's like that big position because they're the one that dots or he's a sousaphone player who dots the I when they spell out Ohio. So it's like a big honorary position. Oh. So I did that. But if I wrote a second book, like another rivalry series book, I would absolutely do. Like I was thinking I would do a baton twirler. I would do a color guard girl.
That would be so fun. Yeah. I don't think I've seen anything.
No, so there's Drumline by Stacey Keswick. I've read that, and it's really, really good.
Yeah.
And so he's in a college Drumline. Yeah.
Oh,
and it's spicy. Because drummers are the best.
Right, I'm thinking about like the movie Drumline, and like when they like.
Yeah,
I'm
it's sexy, right?
Let me eat. Like, can you do that with your fingers somewhere else? Because send them my way. Yeah. Where did you meet Nick?
So I met my husband. We always joke we met in a hot tub in Jamaica.
So, is that real?
Yes, it is real. So we were both on family vacations. And so we were down in Jamaica. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, and he was living in Kentucky. And so I was on vacation with my family, but also my best friend went with us. And so she spotted him first and was like, that guy in the green shirt, he is mine. And I was like, go get him. And so we went to a karaoke bar that night, and she was heckling him because he wasn't singing. And so made him come up on stage and sing with us. And so then we started talking, and then we were like, oh, we're going to go get in the hot tub. So we went and got in the hot tub together. And so she tried. She tried very hard. Unfortunately, he was not interested in her. And so after like the third day, she's like, well, this isn't working. And I was like, do you mind if I take a crack at him? And she's like, go for it. So yeah. So then we exchanged numbers, and we did the long distance thing for a year or two. And then I moved down to Chicago, and he moved up to Chicago. And yeah.
Wow. How was long distance?
It's good. I think you can always start long distance, but it's much harder to go the other way. If you start together and then have to go long distance, I think that's so much harder. But this was when we were dating. It was sort of when cell phones were still relatively new. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, you used to have to pay for long distance unless it was like free nights and weekends.
Right. After 9.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I had gotten my first cell phone, and I thought my plan included free nights and weekends. They had told me it did. So we would rack up these like really long phone calls at night. And then I got my first bill, and it was $1,200. And I was like, holy shit. And they said it was the biggest bill in U.S. cellular history. So I went back to the guy that he lived across the hall from me in our apartment. I went back to him and was like, you told me I had free nights and weekends. And he was like, oh, I screwed up. You do. And so they were able to credit it.
Oh,
but
nice.
I was like, I about died because I was a poor college kid. When I had gotten that bill, $1,200, I was like, I'm never going to eat again. Like, how am I going to pay for this?
So you guys met when you were still in college?
Yeah, I had just finished college. So it was still, we met in the summer where, yes.
Oh, you were graduating?
Yes.
Okay. Was Nick still in college?
So no, yeah, he was done with college.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's lovely. How did he propose?
So at that point we were living together. Mm-hmm. And so we went downtown to downtown Chicago. And we walked to the Bean, like the Millennium Park, the Cloud Gate sculpture. And it was actually under construction. I think that was back when it used to have rivets in it. And the artist didn't like the way the rivets looked. So they were having to hand like sand down every rivet on it's a huge sculpture. If you haven't seen it, it's this giant like kidney bean shaped sculpture. And so they were doing it a section at the time. So only the tiniest section of it was exposed that had been like finished. And so he was like, let's take a picture in front of it. And, it's like crowded. It's full of tourists. And Nick is just like wandering around. And I was like, you could just ask that person. And he's like, no. And I was like, well, you could ask that person. He's like, no. And then finally he found somebody. He's like, will you take a picture of us? And the guy's like, sure. And so he gets down on one knee. And so we have pictures of the moment where he proposed. But the thing that was so funny is that I knew Nick had bought the ring. And he'd had it for like 4 months before he proposed. Because after he bought the ring, the jewelry store had sent a thank you card home with their letterhead on it.
Come on,
I knew store. We'd gone ring shopping there, right. And then they sent him a thank you note. And so it was like, well, so for 4 months, every time we would do something special, I was like, is this the moment?
Oh, shit.
Is this the moment? And then because we'd gone downtown like 2 months before he proposed, and we rode the Ferris wheel at Navy Pier. And so I was like, any second now. Nope. Didn't happen. The whole day I was like on pins and needles, and it never happened.
Did he ever tell you why he chose like the Bean moment to propose?
I'm sure he did. I don't remember. It was yeah. Oh yeah. He took a long time to ask my dad permission. Okay. And because my dad's a little intimidating. And he knew that my dad was going to say yes, but it's still scary. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I mean, my dad was like, hell yes, get her off the payroll. So, yeah.
What are you working on currently?
So my Nashville Neighborhood series has 5 books, and I thought The Good Girl, book 5, was going to be the end of the series. But I've got a new story idea, so I am in the outlining stages of book 6 of that series, and it's going to be called The Broker.
The Broker. Yes. Nice. Now you and Nick outline together?
Yes. Yeah. So we usually I tell him like my story idea, and then he's like, yeah, it's not great. Here's some ideas of how it could be better, which actually is fantastic for outlining, because you want somebody that's going to push you. You don't always, you should never go with the first idea.
Right.
And so it's so helpful.
Right.
And sometimes if you just tell the story over and over and over again, you refine, you make it better. So yeah.
Are there any tropes or like taboo topics that you haven't covered yet that you would like to explore?
I've never done step siblings, which I would love to do. And it's not taboo, but another thing I would love to do would be a bodyguard. So I haven't written a bodyguard, and I just
yeah. Please give us the bodyguard. Is there any trope that you would never do?
I'm not a big fan of Secret Baby.
Thank you.
I get why people like it, but and that's great for them. But it just does not appeal to me.
Okay. Is there any book that you have read in the past year or so that you have loved that you think everyone should be reading?
I haven't read a whole lot this past year, but I will tell you that the one book that has stayed with me for forever is Degradation by Stilo Fantôme. Okay. It's been out for a while. I actually think today might be its 10-year anniversary. So, but oh my God, that book was just that, like, I remember we were sitting out by the pool and everybody was swimming, and I was just glued to my iPad. Like, I was like, I don't want to do anything else in the world but read this book, because it was just, I was on the edge of my seat. I freaking loved it.
When you're writing, what's your favorite? Like, do you like to eat, drink, play music?
Oh no. So I can't listen to music. I could listen to maybe instrumentals when I'm reading, but if it's got lyrics, I get too distracted. I can't have the TV on, any of that stuff. Yeah. I just
when you're reading or writing?
Oh, well, really both. Okay. When I'm writing, I will listen to instrumental music, but I can't have the TV on. Like my friend Aubrey Bondurant, when she writes, she'll just turn on HGTV or a movie or whatever, and she can just bang it out. And I'm so jealous. I wish I could do that, but like I would just be glued to the TV. Like I'm like squirrel, you know, like I couldn't do it.
Do the characters come first or does the story come first?
Usually it's this like a specific scene will come to me and then I'll be like, okay, how did these people come to be in this scene? And then it will grow from that. So I guess I would say it's the story that comes first for me. Okay. And then how, you know, what kind of character would exist in this story.
When you write not only the sex scenes, but just like you're writing books that have a lot of characters in them and a lot of play in it. Do you do any research within like the kink community or BDSM community? And how does that look for you?
Yeah. So I used to use Tumblr all the time and it was such a great community. That was where I really like learned so much stuff about not just BDSM, but about like the queer community, LGBTQ, all that stuff. So it's been really hard when it went away. And not that Tumblr went away, but when it changed, right? So so now I will use BDSMLR.com and it sort of does the same thing. It just doesn't have quite as good of a community. It's more of just sexy images and things like that. So, but yeah, so and I just try to if I see something that's in that
caught your eye,
then I will try to investigate and make sure that I'm staying authentic. You know,
I feel like every time I read something that's like within that realm, I'm like, one, I want to go to a sex club right away. And I haven't made like the plunge yet, but when I've looked into them, I feel like they feel so safe. Like there's so many, or at least the ones I've researched, like they feel like they have so many protocols in place for like women to be safe specifically. Like I think there's like even nights, I think I looked at some South Florida ones and it was like there was nights where like you could bring a single man, but aside from that, single men are not really welcome. Like you are bringing just like single women can come in, but there's like a bunch of safety protocols and I'm like,
So in my book, The Architect, that's in Nashville and they go to a sex club and all of the rules that one of the guys talks about, that's all based on the actual rules of a sex club that used to exist in Nashville. So it's like the things about how you have to be vetted. You can't just walk in and pay money and come in. You actually have to submit like a background check and things like that.
Oh, I love that.
And that you know, for a single man, it's like $100 a night, and then you can only sit at the bar. If someone approaches you, then you can go other places with that person. But if you're a single woman, you're absolutely free.
Right. Yeah. So. And that's kind of like similar to what I read. And I was like, okay, like this feels a lot more safer. Yeah. I feel like I would want to go one day to like watch.
Yes.
And then figure out if like this is my jam or this is not my jam.
It's a very interesting, it's fascinating just to see all the different types of people and sort of like how it works. And everybody, the time I went, everybody seemed very, very friendly in a very tasteful, considerate way. Right. And it was just a very positive experience. Yeah.
That's lovely to hear. I think, especially when we're talking about like sex and sexuality and like things of that nature, I feel like, again, right, it's so taboo and like society as a whole kind of frowns upon it. So being able to really be in a space where like you feel safe to explore all these things, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Do you think that your books are a good gateway for people to think of things that they might want to explore?
Yeah. I mean, I think any book of mine is a good gateway with the exception of Sorted and maybe not so much Three Little Mistakes because that's like, you know, like a college level, 500 level type book. Like maybe start with any other book that's not quite as advanced. But yeah, I always try to write very sex positive books.
I love that.
Because I just want, you know, I enjoy sex and I want people to feel the same way.
Right. Have any readers ever reached out and been like, through your books, I was able to explore XYZ?
Yes. And I've had a lot of readers reach out and say, like, you saved my marriage and things, which is, I mean, what a compliment, right?
Oh, I love that.
You know, and that, there are people, I've had people that say, oh, I read this book and then I gave it to my partner and told them to read it. And it felt sort of safe for them to be like, are you interested in that?
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that what people get wrong about romance books, I think, is that they become such a like safe haven for women. Have never, and just people with vulvas in general, right? Like have never been able to safely explore their pleasure,
right?
Because it's always shameful. It's always like you're just supposed to serve for the pleasure of like what a man wants. So I think romance just becomes such a safe space for us to be able to be like, because you never know where the conversation is going to go.
Right.
So I think that it's always like a safe way to explore those things.
Yeah. And what's going to end in a happily ever after.
Right.
So it's like no matter what happens, that it's going to end happily.
Right. I love that. What, aside from the next book in the Nashville Neighbors series, is there anything else you have in the works?
So I have been, I'm like, at this point, I'm like 25,000 words into a romantasy.
Oh.
So, yeah, which is a wild departure from anything I've written before.
Because when you did Peculiar Taste, I remember that you were like, what did I just sign up for?
Yeah, because that was a horror romance. And that was, and I think people were like, oh, this is very different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just had this story idea in my head for like, it's been so noisy in my brain for so long. And the only way I can do it is if it's a fantasy. It's not something that would ever exist in reality. So yeah, I've started reading a lot of fantasy romance. I'm like, oh, kind of like this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Is there going to be dragons?
Right now there are no dragons.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a light magic system, nothing too crazy. But yeah, I didn't realize since I've never written a fantasy before, the world building and like all the stuff you have to figure out, currency and government. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done?
Yeah.
This is so intense.
And it's like interesting because I feel like romantasy readers are like a hit or miss in that like sometimes they love world building and other times they're like, it's fine. Just give me the bare minimum.
Yeah,
and
just give me what I need.
Yeah. And I think books that are heavy on world building sometimes can be a little bit more hard to get into because if that's not your jam, then you're just like, what? Like,
well, you feel like you're like reading a history book and it's can be a little dry sometimes.
Right. But then when it's just like heavy on like the plot versus you're like, okay, like I can get into this. I don't really care what currency they use. Like, fuck it. Like, just tell me, like, are you fucking or not?
Right, exactly.
Where can people find you online?
So my website's nikkisloane.com, and that's Sloane is with an E. So yeah.
And the social handles.
So it's author Nikki Sloane on Instagram and author Nikki Sloane on TikTok.
Okay. And if you had to fuck, marry, kill any tropes, what would they be?
So, I mean, I guess it depends on how do you, is fuck like the best or is like marry the best? Because that's the one that you live with for like the rest of your life.
Oh, up to you.
You know what I mean? So, okay. So then I guess I would say marry age gap because it's like my favorite. What else? What are my other... And obviously I would kill Secret Baby. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's just
same.
not my jam.
Same. Anything with babies, really, I'm like, kill it.
And then
sorry.
I guess fuck would just be Minaj. Like I just like them. The more the merrier. Yeah.
Sensational. Anyway, thank you, Nikki, for having us and for talking to us
absolutely.
today.
This is great.
Thank you. You can find Romance Unleashed Pod on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Okay, bye.